Introduce everyone and say hi and welcome. Hi folks, thanks for joining us. Welcome to Green Apple Books on the Park. I'm Car Johnson, the events coordinator for Green Apple Books. Thank you for joining us for this event with Susan Straight and Vanessa Hua celebrating Mecca. Let's make some noise. Thank you as well to those of you joining us online. We really appreciate it, and it's such a fun thing of the modern era, like a little small consolation that we get to connect with people all around the world via Zoom. We will be making this available for rewatch on our YouTube page, so you can check that out in about a week. We are asking that people in the event area keep their masks on during the event. We appreciate that. We're giving our authors the grace to take theirs off for the event. After the event and the rest of the story, you are welcome to do as you wish, but just in the event space, we're doing that tonight. I will keep our announcements very brief because we have a full, lively evening ahead of us. I will say we have a very full event calendar this year as well. Just this season alone, we have Miyako Kawakami with Ruto Zeki virtually joining us, Hernan Diaz, Otessa Moshfegh, and Lydia Yuknovich. That's just like this next 2 months. So all of our events are free unless stated otherwise. That being said, if you've been here before, you've heard me say, please buy books. Please buy books from us if you can. I can think of like 5 books that you can buy between these 2 authors alone this evening. So if you are able to, please do buy books from us.
I'm buying a copy of Gordo for Blaze.
Perfect.
Because he can't find his.
Oh,
so
no.
That's my plan. We're getting a copy of Gordo tonight.
It was all a plan. So thank you. We always appreciate that. We also this evening have the pleasure of co-sponsoring this event with Alta Journal, which is a publication that we are big fans of. And I'm going to go ahead and bring Alta's managing editor, Blaze Zorega, here to tell you a little bit more about that. Blaze.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Car.
Yeah.
And thank you everyone for coming. I'm very, very excited to be here. I mean, Susan Straight, Vanessa Hua, 2 very, very talented writers, longtime Alta contributors, and to be here at Green Apple, which is San Francisco mainstay legend, thrilled to be here for sure. And you were one of the first bookstores to carry Alta way back when, so we're very grateful, Car. For those who don't know, Alta Journal is a quarterly publication devoted to the arts and culture of California and the West. And that's arts and culture writ large. So in any issue, and particularly like this one, you'd find a story about Tupac Shakur, NFTs, wild boars, and Joan Didion too. You also find a terrific essay by Susan Straight about the wild burros of San Bernardino Mountains.
The wild burros in my friend Dave's backyard.
And I want to say I feel so lucky to be Susan's editor at Alta. One of the very first short stories we published was by Susan, and it's now a chapter in Mecca. So thank you for that. And then, a writer friend, God bless her, Mary Flo Stevens, but one time we were talking, this is a long time ago, and I think it was Peter Taylor had told her to think that all writing comes from a lake, and that we as writers and editors and readers and bookstores, it's our job, we're obligated to feed the lake, to keep it going, to help each other out, to particularly help writers. And when I think about Susan, she's been a professor at UC Riverside for more than 30 years. She's been invaluable in terms of feeding the Alta Lake, constantly referring great writers to us. She's mentoring all the time. You're so prolific. I mean, you are the lake.
At home, they call me OG. There's no lake. It's just they're like, oh, she's the OG. And I'm like, do I have to be old now? Yes, I am.
And one of the people that Susan mentored or taught is Vanessa Hua at UC Riverside down there. And so it's not my job to introduce them, so I'll just stop there. But it is my job to say, please support Green Apple, please buy their books, please buy Alta Magazine if you want. There's copies here for sale, or visit us at altaonline.com.
And subscriptions are only?
Well, right now, so we have a membership that is an all access membership for $50 a year, or $3 a month for digital only as well, and individual copies are always for sale.
Mother's Day is coming up.
And I encourage you, Mecca, and then Vanessa's book, Forbidden City, is coming out in May. So there's also a pre-order Mother's Day.
Yes,
gift.
I give subscriptions to Alta to my friends and family because they're like, no one writes about California. And I'm like, but we do write about California. and they are so excited. And the online subscription is really wonderful for them. So I would encourage you to do that. There's Ziziva in the house too.
Yeah. Howard.
Ziziva,
And here's our publisher, and Will Hurst.
right?
here.
And Ziziva is the same thing. Like that's writing from the West Coast, and we're always talking up that, you know, when we go to New York and everyone's like, oh my God, you guys write out there? We're like,
So feed
Oh my
the
God,
lake.
we
That's my
do.
message. So feed the lake tonight.
Feed the lake.
Support these two women.
yeah.
Turn it into a flip.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Connor. And big shout out to Connor too.
So much, Blaze. What a treat. I'm sorry, Susan. I'm making you stand here so much longer than I intended.
Okay, I'm gonna be seeing you later.
I'll keep it as brief as possible, but we love Alta, so thank you for showing them love too. We have plenty of copies of the Didion issue at the front with not only beautiful writing, but beautiful photos as well. Without further ado, I'm gonna go ahead and introduce the two authors that are joining us this evening. First, Vanessa Hua is a columnist for the San Francisco Chronicle and a Green Apple favorite, as well as the author of A River of Stars and the story collection Deceit and Other Possibilities. A National Endowment for the Arts Literature Fellow, she also received a Rona Jaffe Foundation Writers Award, the Asian Pacific American Award for Literature, and a Steinbeck Fellowship in Creative Writing, as well as many other accolades. She's an accomplished journalist and writing educator, and she lives here in the Bay Area with her family. I would be remiss if I didn't tell you, you can pre-order her latest novel, The Forbidden City, which comes out on May 10th. And I'll do a little plug. If you pre-order it tonight, you can get a book plate signed by Vanessa for it. So just show us the receipt and we'll give you a book plate. Without getting off track, please do welcome Vanessa Hua. And last but certainly not least, Susan Straight is the author of several novels, including the national bestseller High Wire Moon, which is a finalist for the National Book Award, and A Million Nightingales, which is finalist for the Los Angeles Times Book Prize, as well as the memoir In the Country of Women. She's the recipient of the Edgar Award for Best Short Story, the O. Henry Prize, the Lannan Literary Award, and a Guggenheim Fellowship. And her stories and essays have appeared in many places, including the New Yorker, Granta, and elsewhere. She was born and continues to live in Riverside, California with her family, where she serves as a distinguished professor of creative writing at UC Riverside. Her novel, Mecca, is the reason we are here tonight. So please join me in welcoming Susan Straight.
Thanks.
Hello? Oh, wait.
We have to turn
I
it on.
know.
Are we good?
Hello.
Is the
Okay.
sound working?
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks so much for that wonderful introduction, Car, and for Alta for hosting us. It's really special to be able to be in conversation with Susan.
And to be back in person, although I'm glad
Yes.
people are able to watch online as well. It's nice to be with you.
Yeah. I remember being in grad school and seeking advice from Susan. And she said, can you hop into the minivan with me? Because I think you needed to be on your way right after to
We
pick up your
sat in the
daughters.
parking lot in my car. I have 3 daughters. Now they're 32, 30, and 26. But when you were in school, they were young. And so I used to have office hours in my van in the parking lot. And she used to come sit with me for 20, 30 minutes, talk about the world.
Well, giving me advice on the book that's coming out in May. So thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Really exciting. It doesn't make me feel old because like a lot of us, my mom's friend Patty's daughters in the back, but it is funny. I don't mind at all. I keep thinking, oh, Michael Jaime Becerra, Alex Espinosa, Sarah Borjas, they're all writing for Alta now. And you worked with Michael as well. I think what you said about the lake is pretty apt place.
Yeah. And I think later on in our conversation, I really hope to talk about literary community and how
Yeah.
you really carried the torch for
But-
so many of us. Yeah.
Even though I'm supposed to be selling this, I'm just saying, you worked on this book and you didn't give up. That's the thing. Like it took me, it takes years to think about these characters long enough to do a good job with them. And so we are going to have to talk about that. Like for any of you who are writers in the audience, it takes a while, but it's worth not giving up. So I'm excited that your book's coming out.
Definitely. So Susan, can you treat us with a reading from Mecca, this amazing novel?
I thought I would read you all just a little bit from the very beginning, if that's okay. And Blaze, Torrega, when he said that we worked together, one thing about writing a novel that has multiple narratives, which is now I know the fancy name, it's a polyphonic novel, right? But I'm actually teaching a new class, and I just finished writing an essay for Lit Hub, which is I like that magazine online, and it's about the polyphonic novel, and it's the idea that you remember that we're a lot of times it's not a short story collection, it's a different kind of thing. It's a novel in stories, or it's a novel that has multiple voices. Johnny Frias, this first part I'm going to read you a little bit. I wrote this from a real incident that I've been trying to write about forever. We had a freeway phantom on the 91 in Orange County in 1976. He threw rocks from the Santa Ana riverbed. He would come all the way onto the median of the freeway and throw big old like baseball sized rocks. And people were injured, people, their windshields were shattered or their cars crashed. And he did that for about a year and a half. And I remember being terrified because I was 15 and 16 and learning to drive. And so our moms would all be like, watch out for the freeway phantom because he'll come right out of the river bottom and kill you by throwing a grapefruit sized rock. And we were just, so I have this friend named Cowboy who's really scary. He's been in like special ops in the military for 30 years. And he came by about a month ago and he was like, show me your new book. So I did. And then he's like, what is this? Is this the freeway phantom? I remember him. I was scared. And I was like, wait, you were scared of the freeway phantom? I wrote Johnny Frias as a guy who's 7th generation American, born in Santa Ana, Yorba Linda, Placentia area, who's descended from the earliest people that came to California. And still, while he's a California Highway Patrolman, he gets asked like, oh, do you have a green card? Like, oh, don't you need to go back to Mexico? Because he's dark skinned, he's Moreno. And people assume that he's not qualified to be CHP. And that came from, all my friends that were correctional officers and sheriff's deputies who were men of color back in the day. And
Right,
think
but-
about that.
He scores 100, but the sergeant thinks he cheated.
So something that we've been talking about, and that I just thought I'd preface this a little bit, is that my mom didn't speak English when she came to this country. She learned from Vin Scully Dodger broadcasts how to speak English. And Vanessa and I have spent a lot of time talking about how our ears work. So to speak American is something that Johnny Frias is trying to do in this book, is to speak Spanish and to speak English. So for any of us who can speak multiple languages, it's the way he kind of looks at the world. So there's Spanish in this book, and that's something that we have talked about as well.
In Mixtec.
Yes, there's Mixtec in the book as well. The wind started up at 3 a.m., the same way it had for hundreds of years. The same way I used to hear the blowing so hard around our little house in the canyon that the loose windowsills sounded like harmonicas. The old metal weather stripping played like the gods pressed their mouths around the screens in the living room where I used to sleep when I was growing up. After I got off work this morning, the wind took a break and I was knocked out for a few hours, waking up to hear Rose Sotelo's radio next door playing ranchero music, tubas and trumpets thumping against the stucco, Rose's canaries worried in their little songs. But now that I was back on shift, the patrol Harley was pushing hard against the biggest gusts. The Santa Ana's blowing crazier than ever, the way they always did in the afternoon, like they were fierce from waking up from the nap. Brazilian pepper trees, the ones that grew in every vacant lot or frontage road area along the 91 and the 55 freeways, had those long branches like ferns or seaweed. And when the wind blew them sideways like skirts, I could see homeless encampments under a lot of trees. It was a Thursday in October, Santa Ana winds, 94 degrees, fire weather. People were 3 layers of pissed off. Everyone hated Thursday. Wednesday was hump day, but Thursday was when people drove like they wanted to kill each other. Today, everybody was thinking about the Dodgers had lost, even though they were supposed to be the boys of October. And now the 2019 baseball season was over. Then the wind. Every few minutes, dust and trash flew across the lanes. But the fall winds always made me think of my mother, holding me tight in the old redwood chair my father had tied to the porch railing up in Fuego Canyon, while the Santa Anas blew in the black night when they always started. And my first memory, my mother talking to me before dawn, the gusts so strong it felt like our house would go rolling down the canyon like a tumbleweed. She'd say, nothing else is for sure but the wind, mijo. we might not get rain for a whole year, but we always get the Santanas.
That was wonderful. So you write about harsh landscapes, but there's beauty and tenderness in the people who live there. Can you talk about sort of the origins of this novel? And I had read an interview with you a few years ago where you had described it as somehow tied to the freeway system. So maybe you could talk about that.
It is a funny thing to be a native of California, but a native of SoCal, when everybody sort of makes fun of the freeways and hates the freeways. And it's not that my neighbors and I love driving on the freeway, but in my neighborhood, you know, we were talking about this at dinner, like my next door neighbor, Mario, we used to have this competition. He heating and air conditioning, you know, he has like a truck and a trailer, and he would take care of all the cell phone towers in the desert, like making sure they had heating and air conditioning. Like, so your cell phones work, right? So I would come home and I'd be like, Mario, man, I had to drive to Palm Desert for a job, and I would think I was gonna win. Every day Mario's like, Susan, that's nothing. Today I went to Calexico, and then I went to Raleigh, and then I came up and I went to Palm Desert, and then I had dinner, and then I went to Thousand Oaks. Every day I would try to beat Mario, and I never beat him. And I think often about, also my ex-husband was a correctional officer. Our cousin was a female correctional officer at Chuckawalla State Prison in Blythe. She was transferred from Chino. She had to drive to Blythe. That's just, you know, a 4-hour drive. So she had to do that every day, and she couldn't do it. She still had a teenager at home. I just saw her daughter just died, and I went to the funeral. And this is my cousin Diane. And she said, you know, girl, they transferred me out there. They transferred a bunch of women out there, and they knew it would be hard for us to drive. So a few of them got an apartment. So just think about having a commute from Riverside to Blythe. And a lot of this book came from the idea, not that I think the freeway system is great, not that I love that we're using fossil fuels, but that like there is beauty in the way that my neighbors and my relatives and my family and my friends sort of navigate, like you said, San Bernardino to, you know, Lancaster, driving to Victorville. I have a friend who drives every day to Victorville for work. You know, that's just an incredibly difficult drive. I think often of that Saturday Night Live thing. Remember where people made fun of the freeways? And
Right, the Californians.
the Californians, girl, I hadn't thought about that. But you know, that'd be like making fun of us for the numbers. And if you're from, you know, today I was talking to Sasha Koka at KQED, and she's from SoCal and then lived in Fresno. She's like, I remember when I came up to the Bay Area, I'd be like, the 10. She's like, where are you from? You must be from SoCal. Because when you're at home, so I'll just tell you that to me, that was tied to like, that's the rivers of emotion, but the freeways of love. Like I will drive 3 hours for my kid like that, you know, and my ex-husband and I did that. We drove from Riverside up to Albany 3 times in July, back and forth, because, you know, we had the truck. And he was like, I guess we're going to drive 6 hours. He didn't even turn the radio on. He just talked the whole time. He, you know, he's like telling me stories. So I think they're all connected with the idea of storytelling.
Well, in the novel, Matelas
Mandalas.
makes these epic drives for her sons and for her uncle, who's not her uncle, to go to his brother, who is not his brother.
Yeah.
And so, and I think I've noticed this throughout this novel and other books where there's definitely a sense of families chosen and received. And I was hoping you could talk about in your memoir too, just how that's been an important part of your body of work.
I think that's a great question. No one's asked me that before. Like, I mean, how many people in here you have people you call cousins or family, and yes, they're not your blood relatives? Anybody? Okay. See, I'm just saying. So like it's a tradition if you grow up poor, especially, I think. And the way we grew up is a safety net, right? You have to have that safety net. And so my kids grew up calling this one guy their Uncle Trent. Like, is he their blood uncle? No. He's their uncle because he had trouble with his family, so he came to live with my mother-in-law, and he's been my cousin ever since. He's a serious gangster. If they have trouble, my girls, he said, if things got really bad, we would have to call Uncle Trent. And I'm like, but remember, if you call him, you can't uncall him. And they're like, what did you just say? And I said, if you call Uncle Trent, you have to want him to come. They're like, we don't want him to come. I said, then never call him. And then they're just like, you guys are really weird. If though, I had to say this, my ex-husband got COVID in November, and you know, who took care of him? It was me and Uncle Trent. Like, we were the ones that were willing to go. He weighs 330 pounds. I had to get him in the ambulance. We were the ones that went and took care of him. So you're right, like that chosen family is kind of a big deal because there's 5 guys in this novel, 4 of them that really matter. Grief Embers is a descendant of some of the very first enslaved people brought to California. Alta actually ran a great piece about Biddy Mason. This notion that no one in California is from anywhere, I don't think you guys believe that, right? Like, if you're from Fresno, you're from Fresno, and you'll be from Fresno forever. And if you're from San Bernardino, then you know the story of Biddy Mason. So there's one character in here named Grief Embers, and I named him after a real person who came as enslaved during that time, because again, my family goes way, way, way back in Riverside, not my mom's side, but my married side. They're like, oh yeah, I remember, you know, so-and-so's granddaughter was the first Black teacher in Southern California. And that was from that same family that came enslaved. So you're right, that's a good question.
Well, and these they all, when a couple gets COVID, they all come to the rescue of the son Dante.
Yeah.
And then when Metellus needs to help in Mecca,
Right.
like they're all coming together as well. And I mean, is that how you feel like they're able to survive COVID, or, you know?
And everyday life.
Yeah.
I think the giganticness of our family in a place like Riverside's East Side is, I mean, there are probably 400 people that call me auntie. That's like 3 generations of people. And if that person calls me, I will go, you know. And my girls have learned that. I think my girls were very resistant, my 3 daughters, to that idea, because it's true, like, it's hard for us, isn't it? When you grow up like that, like, you spend almost all your energy taking care of everyone. So it's different from, like, I get jealous. I know you do too. Like, people are like, oh my God, COVID was such a great reset. I just like stayed home and I wrote 2 novels. I'm like, I was at funerals, you know? I was feeding people. I had to feed Mario, that neighbor I just told you about. He was in the first 100 people in Riverside County. 5,000 people have died in Riverside County. Mario was in the first 100 to get COVID. So, you know, we had to cook for his family and leave the food on the porch forever and ever and ever. And the same thing when my ex-husband got sick, like, people took care of us. It's a different thing, isn't it? Like, it's not the way things are supposed to work, but it is a safety net. And so in the book, I think what I'm trying to write about is that notion. Johnny, the one I read to you, he's not married, he doesn't have kids, because there are reasons he's afraid to have anybody love him. And I thought about what that means, to be afraid to have that, because all of his friends are married and have kids, but he is like the Uncle Trent character. He
Yeah.
shows up to help Dante when Dante's parents get COVID. And Johnny Frias works nights as a CHP officer, and then in the daytime he watches this kid, and he has to just like put food like outside the door.
So you began this novel before the pandemic, and then was there a thought where you would somehow keep the pandemic out of it, or how did you sort of decide that, this has to be a part of it?
Is anybody in here writing? Are there writers in the audience? Because it's truly, that's something that a lot of people have said, like, oh, I'm not ready to write about the pandemic. Again, like the way I live, that was never, I was finishing this, but there was a plot strand that I was stuck on. So the idea, the story that I wrote for Alta was about a guy who's a butcher at Stater Brothers, which is an iconic supermarket chain in Southern California. Like, Stater Brothers is old school. And he's a butcher, and he has a heart attack. And his friends are nurses. So I will be honest with you all and say the other part about my neighborhood is that there's a ton of nurses. There's 3 nurses that live on my block. There's 2 nurses on the next block over. And we're the kind of neighborhood where, you know, everybody's outside because it's hot. So I have a big yard and I'm out watering or whatever. During COVID, there were 2 visiting nurses that lived in an RV on my block. And they walked by every day. They walked by my fence. I have books out, the fence library. These 2 nurses would walk by. One was from Indiana and one was from Texas. And so I used to save Texas books for Carrie. And I used to give Rice Krispie treat bars to the one from Indiana because you can't lose with Rice Krispie treat bars. I buy them in the suitcase size box. Like, it's the big box.
And well, Susan has a wonderful little free library
I will-
outside our house.
Yeah, and so anyway, as they were walking by, they would tell me these stories. And they would be walking 7 o'clock for the 7 o'clock shift, and then they would get up at 7 in the morning. So I would see them 2 times. And I have to tell you all, like, it was just, they're walking home past my house and they didn't help 3 people die. And then they walked home past the house. And then my other neighbors, Sean and Tammy, is a married couple that are both nurses. During COVID, they would walk down, my house is on the corner, and they would be carrying red Solo cups just full of wine. And they'd get down to the corner and they would look at me like this. And they'd say, don't ask me. So I'd have my wine. And like, how could I not write about that? Because when everybody was distanced from COVID, it was right there, So there were the 4 guys that I told you about that are all friends. The 4 women are nurses. And so COVID just naturally entered the plot line, even as I was finishing it.
Right, because it reflected
It
where
was
these
how it
characters-
happened.
Yeah.
And there's this moment, this is gonna be hard to say, but there's this moment in the book, I might read that little passage.
Yeah.
This character named Dante that Vanessa's talking about, he's a kid. And of course, he's 13. I started writing about him, like 8 years ago, because all the copper wire was getting stolen from our neighborhoods. And in San Bernardino, the copper wire got stolen from all the baseball parks. And then the bleachers got stolen because they're metal. And so suddenly, like, there was no Little League and no one came to the rescue in San Bernardino. So you live in San Bernardino, you just don't get to have baseball. Like, that was just, it was bad. It was bad. And then the copper wire, they struck my corner, my light pole, and they took out the copper wire and they left like the live wires. And I had this other neighbor, Rafa, he was from El Salvador. And Rafa's like, Susan, I just want to see how much sparks they make. And I was just like, why though, Rafa, why? And he's like, I just want to see it. So he saw it and that was appalling. So I just was thinking I wanted to write about copper wire thieves. And Dante's story changed dramatically during COVID because now he was stuck at home during school, wasn't he? And his teacher had to make him do certain things. And his mom had been a nurse in the first draft and she had been doing hospice care and he missed her. And then girl, here I am writing the
Right.
second draft. And I'm like, well, of course I know where she is. She's not doing hospice care. She's in the RV. She can't come home. It changed a plot line, but it didn't change like the emotion, but it definitely changed. It heightened everything. When my friends who were nurses would come and talk to me, it's because I was listening. Like I would stand there and listen to them. My friend Marcia, that I've known for 30 years, one night she came by and she said, the hardest thing for her to watch was big grown men having to lie on their stomachs because COVID hit the big guys the hardest. My ex-husband's 6'4" and he weighs 330. Now he weighs 299 after COVID, but he had to lie on his stomach. She told me this last year. She said, when you see those bare feet and they're facing the wrong way, she said, it makes me want to cry every night. Now I can't make that up.
Yeah.
But it hurt me to hear that. And so that entered the fiction for sure.
And I think with
You guys are like, we don't want to read this book.
No,
This
it's
is so depressing.
no, it's beautiful. Like even the passage that you'll read about the Perseid meteors, or there's a moment in the book where a character says, my grandma says, if you just notice one beautiful thing a day, then
Yeah.
you can survive. And I was hoping you could talk about that because the way you talk about landscapes in places that, don't get depicted on TV or in movies, you bring the, like a beauty and nobility to it. So if you could speak to that.
I think that's something that's really, it's always like the overlooked character is how much landscape operates, right? Not in every book, especially not in auto. There's a lot with auto fiction where people don't write as much. Like my students talk to me about Rachel Cusk and Sally Rooney, that they like their fiction because it's untethered by that. But I'm old school and so I can't help it. Like it's all about, the landscape for me. So I love coming up here. I love when people tell me about their neighborhoods in San Francisco. Because I mean, San Francisco's got people like, no, man, I'm not from there. I'm from here. And my daughter, when she lived here, every time I came up, she would show me a new neighborhood, like Hunters Point. Oh, we spent some time in Hunters Point, and it was cold. So we went to the store. We went to one of those little neighborhood stores. I know her whole life story too. She's like, girl, let me tell you about Hunters Point back in the day. And then, we bought ice cream at her store, and 2 hours passed by, and my daughter's like, really? Really? And I was like, it was cold. I think the landscape of a place like Hunters Point is so particular and specific to this place that I think about the landscapes of my place, like Fontana, Bloomington, Rialto. There is such beauty along the Santa Ana River. It's a wild river. It's one of the last wild rivers. And so it's 100 miles. And so I saw a bobcat down there, with my dog, and I was thrilled beyond measure because to see a bobcat, and my dog looked at the bobcat and the bobcat looked at my dog. I literally said, oh my God, you're a bobcat. And I was like, yes, that's accurate. Did you want to take a few more steps? I'm like, me? No, I'm okay. My dog was like, me neither. I'm good. And then my dog's big. And then the bobcat was like, and then just levitated and turned in the air and leapt over the grapevines and was gone. That's how lucky I feel. We got chased by 10 coyotes last month. That wasn't so fun. And I was in my work shoes. So I had to run 3 miles in clogs. And then I always call Dwayne Mix, and he's like, I told you not to go down there at 4. I'm like, it's very light at 4 o'clock. Not light enough.
But AM?
4 p.m.
Okay.
I don't get it. 4 p.m. I thought it's still light. The coyotes won't be out yet. 10 of them. And Angel loves coyotes. She's like, you're a particularly attracted male dog. I really like the way she runs toward them. Anyway.
Well, beyond, I think a coyote does appear, animals appear in the book.
There are lots of
Yeah.
them.
And then I was wondering, in terms of, I noticed Glorette showed up. Glorette was in Between Heaven and Here, her wonderful, is it a novel and stories or a short story
No,
collection?
it's a novel.
It's a novel, right? Who's murdered, but she's sort of like this, the wound around which the stories are in Between Heaven and Here. But I was so excited to see her appear in Mecca as well, and so I began to wonder, do you have a family tree that you've mapped out, or how did you decide to sort of bring that bloodline back into the story?
I don't think anybody ever leaves us.
Yeah.
My brother died 20 years ago this last February, and I think about him every single day. Everyone's like, oh, there are all the cliches that we hear about when someone dies. And nope, I still miss him every single day. And my dad died last May, so it'll be a year pretty soon. And I just still, I gotta ask my dad that thing, I gotta ask my dad that thing. And you guys know what I'm talking about. For me, the characters remain the same. I think about them quite frequently. And I just wrote that thing I told you about, the Polyphonic Novel, when I was writing about Louise Erdrich. So there's maybe 5 or 6 of us who just continue to write about the same characters. Has anybody in here read Louise Erdrich? She's great. And Love Medicine, the characters that show up in that book, they continue to have, some of them have their own novels. And I find that fascinating. Edward P. Jones, who wrote Lost in the City, some of those characters show up later in Alta Journal's Children. So, and Kent Harif, Plainsong, also Marilyn Robinson writes about this same family. For me, this is my place.
Yeah.
And so I was shocked, girl, Madalas goes to the taqueria, and here's Serafina and Araceli, and they were main characters in High Wire Moon who had just crossed the border into California, and they showed up. They have a taqueria now. I was super excited to know they were doing fine, but I didn't know. I was just like, oh, you went to El Ojo de Agua, and there they were. And I have no idea how that happens. Enrique is a character that I've been obsessed with for many years. And he's the father of one of my friend's fathers, who was the enforcer. It's the guy you went to. And I know you guys think I'm saying this casually. I'm not. I wanted to write about how hard it is to be that guy. Because I'm the one on the corner that gives everybody food and books, and I will listen to you forever. I'm a tiny little blonde lady. So like everyone just tells me their life story constantly. But my brother was an enforcer and my cousin is an enforcer. And that's a huge burden to be the man that everyone calls when they're in trouble, or the man that everyone calls to fix your flat tire, but then also somebody beat you up. And that is what I was writing about, is what a burden it is. You know, and you watch The Sopranos and you watch Breaking Bad. I don't watch those shows. I can't watch them because I feel too bad for the characters. And so I wanted to sort of say, like, those characters don't leave me. I still think about them quite frequently. And I'm always surprised when they show up.
And speaking of the enforcers, like Uncle Emiliano, or he's in charge of sort of the compounds. Like, and then
Girl, you're asking such good
Oh.
questions.
I mean, I was so impressed by like the way they move through the world and how they protect their hidden. I think you once talked about sort of like the places that are at the end of a long road with a gate, and sort
Yeah.
of how those kingdoms and how they protect their family that way.
I love that no one else would ever ask me this. We're so much alike in so many ways. Like, I have a friend in Canada on Prince Edward Island. He likes to say, the further down you go on the Burke Road, the meaner everybody is. I live at the end of the Burke Road. I'm like, okay, Bernard. It's everywhere. But for this, you're right. There's a family originally from Oaxaca, and 3 of the brothers went north to California like 20 years ago, and now the niece has come. And people have, I think, stereotypical notions of what an immigrant family is when they're from Mexico. I grew up my whole life. I grew up around people who had immigrated from other countries, and everyone has their ways. But I know so many families, especially from China, from Vietnam, from Cambodia, and from Mexico, where there'll be a family compound. You know, people buy like 7 houses. So that's what there's the 3 uncles, and they have a whole trailer park in Coachella, and they know everybody there, and that is their family compound. And they have another one in Hollywood. And I mean, I know people like that where they own an entire apartment building and everyone in their family lives there, and that's their place. So like, where would I go when the earthquake comes? I'm going to Mario's house, man, because there's all kind of people. Where's everyone else? They're going to come to my house, like, for real. I wanted to write about this notion that family is of paramount importance, because this notion of what we are as Americans, look at how everyone's like, oh, well, what does it mean to be a family? Like, what does it mean to be a true American family? I'm pretty sure that immigrant families are often first generation, the most tight-knit families you can imagine. And that's something I wanted to explore that I don't think people have written about quite as often. And I do know my former student Lang Lo, who's Cambodian. She called me this morning. She's an investment banker now for Citibank. And she called me this morning about something. And her grandmother survived the killing fields and brought her 5 kids. And all 5 kids are here now, along with the aunts. And everyone still takes care of each other. And her mom is 93 years old. And I mean, her grandmother's 93 years old. And just to think about what she must see when she looks at that family, Lang and I talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
But that's the secret, like you said, the secret kingdom
Yeah.
of Lang Lo's grandmother. It's a big kingdom.
Well, the book also had some good prepper tips for the apocalypse. Always carry a 5, a 10, and a 20 in case the power goes out, and you can slit your car seat and hide the money under some duct tape. I'm just saying. There is a sort of speculative network collapsing element of the book. How did that sort of come to be? Or was it just sort of like we're in the end times, so it seemed a natural part to include?
I'm sorry this got so dark. This is on her, man. She just keeps asking me.
I'm telling you, get your money from the ATM now.
In my house, we always have cash. I mean, that is something that Lang laughs about. Like, Cambodian people always have cash. Like, Russian people often have cash. Like, we always had cash because my mom like came from Switzerland during the war when they didn't have any food. So, you know, that generation is like, but we always have cash because of the earthquake. Like, that's a thing. Have you been through an earthquake yet? Anybody? Yes? No? I mean, when you've been through an earthquake, you just be like, oh, that's right. I need to have things. And the food doesn't work, does it? Because we eat it all. Like at my house, with all these kids at my house, we had the tuna and the mac, we ate all that. We ate it like within 2 weeks, and then I'd have to buy more. But we have ones, fives, tens, and 20s everywhere. Because if you only have hundreds, and that's all you have when you go buy a gallon of gas from like the gas station, then you're gonna give up your 100 because he's not gonna make change for you. We also have that, again, to help, like everyone's gonna need to pool their stuff. But the apocalypse in my mind it's different, Vanessa. Like I would have to say I'm thinking about that freeway phantom, the guy that throws the rocks.
Yeah.
How many of us are scared when we're driving on the freeway now someone's gonna shoot us? You guys never worry about that? Because I worry about that all the time. I mean, there's a guy on the 91 that shot 14 different cars last summer. There's a lot, there's guns everywhere. I'm not saying I don't know that. I know that very well, but I feel like the apocalypse is more personal, don't you? I feel like being ready for the apocalypse is still more about making sure that you've got your family all. I'll tell you something I never tell anybody, but I'll tell you guys. There's just all the men come by every few months, all the men who love me in my life come by, and they'll come by on the pretext of something else. And they'll be sitting on the porch and they'll be like, so when the thing happens, like I'm gonna come get you and the dog, and then we're gonna go get my mom. And then I've got like and I'm like, okay, Louis. Just saying. And then like a couple weeks later, Trent comes by and he's like, just saying, my favorite sister-in-law. Like, when the day comes, my plan is I'm gonna come get you and the dog, and we're gonna get my grandma because his mom and dad are passed away. And then we're gonna go get like my niece. And I'm like, okay, is there anything like I need to know? Like,
Wait, so is this
year
happening more recent? This is something that's happening more
for the
recently?
last 2 years.
Okay.
Just once a month. Cowboy, the guy who's in the military, he only comes to Riverside in December. The girls would be like, well, in December, mom's friend Cowboy will come and he'll say like, so when, and it's just, so I feel very lucky because there's 8 different people that say this. So it's like 8 months out of the year, I have this conversation. And at the same time, I'm like, why do these men all feel this way? And I think that they feel as if they want to protect, like we were saying, that chosen family.
Yeah.
And because my girls were grown and they were gone, so they were worried about me. Then COVID, and then everybody came back. No one stops by now. Well, I'm gonna come get you and the 8 people in the house. No. It's been pretty quiet. No one's been offering to come help me at all. Because they like, Rosette's mean. My youngest daughter, she's very, very, they call her scary nurse. If you're sick, she's 26. She works on that TV show Below Deck. And that's a scary show. And yet, yes. Anyway, no one wants to save us now.
Okay. Well, at the end of the world, there's also more time to write. Or what you said that you were already writing a sequel to this. How?
Because COVID's still breaking my heart.
Yeah.
I mean, my neighbor died last month. My neighbor across the street, he died in his house. And he had diabetes. He had already lost 2 of his legs. He was a groundskeeper. He was Chicano. And, he's got like a senior in high school, Oscar. His senior son plays baseball and his sophomore son plays football. And he coached both. And now, his wife is there by herself. I can't stop, right? So this book ends like August of 2020. And then the really bad COVID was December through February. So that's on my mind right now. And yeah, like I'm not done writing about all of these things quite yet. And so also street racing, that there's a lot of like craziness, like people are expressing themselves in very particularly dangerous ways. So it seemed natural for me to want to keep writing about Johnny Frias because he's right there on the front of that. So I wrote my first couple of chapters, and my first chapter was about street racing because that's been happening all around my neighborhood. Neighborhood, you have it in Oakland and San Francisco here too, I know, where people take over the intersections. And since that happens so often, I wanted to write about what our human responses have been to COVID But I don't think about it in general terms like that, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
Vanessa?
It's by character, by.
Well, it
certain-
starts
yeah.
with a runaway bull named Cabron. So that's the next book.
Okay,
Because there's all these animals that get loose during COVID. And since Johnny is highway patrol, but he also grew up on a rancho, then he gets called to take care of a runaway bull named Cabron. So that's how I started.
I'm excited to read it when it comes out. I have a few more questions, but I want to make sure to leave time for audience Q&A.
And I wanted to say something that I really wanted to, this cover, right, is Rodrigo Corral. And I just wanted to say, he does amazing covers for lots of great books, but he wrote to me after reading the book and he said, I'm really excited to do this, you know, as somebody who's Latino to write, to do this cover. And I had no idea what he was gonna do, but isn't this, it's just beautiful. I mean, I've been lucky to have lots of great covers, but this one is just gorgeous. And what I love that I wanted to say to you, like, it's the edges, you know,
Yeah.
like there's all the little weeds and stuff at the edges. Like, it's not the freeway, is it? It's like right at the edge of the freeway where all the stuff really happens. I just love how he captured that.
And that's a Joshua tree, right?
It's a Joshua tree,
Yeah.
not a palm tree. So I think it's funny because, you know, the palm tree, the iconic palm tree and all that, I like those too. But I do love, because the book ends in a canyon out in Coachella.
Yeah.
So
There's a cool, I don't know, almost 70s rock album vibe with the
yeah, I
the
don't know
neon.
how he
Yeah.
did it.
Yeah.
I was really nervous when they first showed it to me. I was like, but the top is cut off and so is the bottom. And Rosette, really, Mom? Like, that's a thing. And I was like, oh. And she's like, it makes the book look better, not boring, like you probably wanted it to look. And she was right.
Well, actually, I remember in grad school, you'd say that your kids, like, something about, like, they see you as a mom and they don't, that, like, they will see you as a mom first. And that's like freeing in a way.
You have
So,
twins. Anything that takes away from the time with your family, like my mom's 87 now and she has dementia. She has a 1 minute memory, like a 1 minute memory. So we play Rummy Cube every afternoon. She's up 11-4 in this week's tournaments. Like, really, she beats me in Rummy Cube
muscle memory.
daily. Well, she worked at the bank and I'm a writer. So does she remember I'm a writer? No, but she just always says you were never good at math. Like, that's the thing. She remembers that. So, like, I'm fine with being nothing, like, in my day-to-day life.
Yeah.
Because then at night when I'm able to write, there's that secret, you know, imaginative world that we get to go into. And again, like, I couldn't be any luckier than to be sitting out by the fence and watering and have somebody come by and tell me a story. Like, it's the best.
Oh, I also remember something about how you would write at, like, basketball games or in the minivan, and how in the end it's that interstitial times when that's how you write a book. Yeah, that's what you have. So
Well, today I was working in that little place that sells the croissant sandwiches.
Tartine.
No,
Oh,
this doesn't have a name as far as
Yeah.
I know. Anyway, it's just a little place and I have my notebook. So I was working on stuff there. But yeah, I feel like because I grew up poor and I always wrote in the notebook, I still like to write in the notebook. Like, that's the way it's gonna work out the best. And to write about someone like Jimena, who came from Oaxaca and is learning about this whole idea that we were just saying, like, what does it mean to speak American and not to speak English or Spanish or Mixtec? I find that, like, writing in the notebook is the best way to write about my characters.
yeah. So the novel, there's multiple points of view. I think Johnny, Jimena, and but yeah, Bateles have the most airtime, so to speak. Is that just how, were they competing for space, or is that just like how
It's
you
just
knew?
how they came.
Yeah.
Just how it came. Do you remember, maybe some people who are my age remember having to make a mission in school in the 4th grade? Like, that was a California thing. And actually, Deborah Miranda is a huge influence on me. Deborah Miranda is a heyday writer. To think about what it was like when I made my mission was my stepdad, who was from Canada, who was like, what are we doing here with the plaster of Paris, right? And my parents, you know, my dad had laundromats and my mom and I cleaned apartments. So it wasn't like we went to a mission, but I took a field trip to the mission. But I brought my girls to the missions when they were each in the 4th grade. We came to Mission Dolores. We went to Carmel. each girl got to pick 2 missions and it was spring break. So I'm telling you the truth, I almost cried driving up here because I missed them so much, but I didn't miss the idea of the missions because the missions themselves, when you think about, we were recreating something like a plantation. And Deborah Miranda writes so eloquently about that. I remember taking Delphine, the middle one, she's 30 now. We went to La Purisma, which is a very beautiful mission, but it's very haunted and not fixed up a lot. And there was a cemetery outside the mission grounds. And that's where the indigenous people were buried. And, you know, my girls are Cherokee, Creek, African, Mystery, Swiss, and French. And so Delphine was 9 and she said to me, we'd be buried out here. And she was totally right. And she said, I don't want to go in there now because if it was back in the day, this would be like where we would be. And her little sister and her big sister just look like, what's up with you? And that's still how she is. You know, she works with the history of African-American women in photography at Berkeley. And so it was just this sword to my heart to think she's completely right.
Yeah.
And that's where that story of Madalas came, is that Madalas is on a trip to the missions with her. She's a single mom with her son. And my friend Gordon Johnson, who's from the Palo Reservation, he and I hung out at San Luis Rey. And that's where all that came. So the stories, like Madalas' story just came because it needed to be right in there.
Yeah.
I can't say I had any big plan, except for that as the year passed, then Johnny Frias would do this and someone else would do that. And at the end, I was really writing about how do we survive? And the little kid, I love what Vanessa said, the little kingdoms at the end of the road is how everybody in this book survives.
Yeah.
You're so perceptive,
So do we have any questions from the audience?
except for it was so sad, everything you said.
Yes.
Well, I have one question. I haven't read the book yet, but I thought I heard that there is this sport martial art
Capoeira.
capoeira. I don't know if you include that in the novel or misread that. And then you mentioned that we call them sideshows, the drag racing. In sideshows, these are a cultural thing that are going on during COVID, you know. So the side.
So yeah, you guys up here call them sideshows.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then like in Santa Ana and in Riverside, like they have other names for them too. And so, but that's in the next book. That's not so much in this book. And the capoeira, this is gonna sound crazy, but Madalas's husband, Rinaldo, decides that he is not Black anymore, he is Brazilian. And he is gonna be a Brazilian guy, and then he leaves her and he becomes a capoeira expert. And I knew a guy like that, and we used to just be tripping on him. We'd be like, you're from Riverside.
He becomes Ray.
He becomes Ray because everybody from Brazil just has one name. And so my son-in-law, who's from Ibadan, Nigeria, thought this was quite hilarious because he makes us watch soccer. And he was like, Mama Susan is very good at telling where everyone is from their names on their soccer jerseys. So that's our big competition now, is I'll be like, this guy's from Brazil, Camille, what do you think? And he's just like, you're so weird. But yes, Ray decides that he is not a guy from San Bernardino or Riverside. He decides he's someone
You've
else.
got Brazilian there, and then the sideshow, and then do you touch on Burning Man? This is Coachella Valley and CHP.
I have never been to Burning Man. And it's not in Coachella, I don't think.
I have been to Burning Man. I got my newspaper. I got the Examiner to pay for it. Writing about the how Silicon Valley moves up there. It's outside of Reno,
Yeah.
not Coachella
Burning-
Valley. Yeah.
But Coachella, the festival. Coachella, the festival is so divorced really from like anything in the Coachella Valley, except for so many people that I know that say, well, when Coachella's here, dude, I work night security, and then I ferry back all these super drugged out people from Sweden, and then I take them to this what, and I'm like, and they're like, man, I make $2,000 when Coachella's here, and I'm like, interesting. So I have interviewed many people in Coachella who see the festival as like this really odd way to make money, but I know the other side of Coachella. Like I know when I go to Coachella, I'm hanging out with people in the date gardens or like at Torres Martinez, and so. Yeah, those are things that are very much a part of the book.
Other questions?
You're all appalled. And you're all like,
Well, how many of you, this is your first in-person reading since the pandemic began?
yeah,
Well, welcome. Welcome back.
you could really ask me anything. I promise I'll tell you, we'll tell funny stories if you want us to.
Or if any, Susan is a fount of writing advice. I actually quote her nearly on a weekly basis. I
That's
do.
very funny. You can't ask us anything, not really. Anything else?
I thought it was cool, one of the chapters in the middle, which is I think one of the most moving for me was Angel Wings. I was very intrigued that it got published in the XPM magazine, especially given how critical the chapter could be read as thinking about how people who play sports are presented in the media and how it intersects with race and violence and class. So I was curious how that chapter got written and how the decision to publish it came about.
The question is about one of the chapters is called Angel Wings. And it's about it's told from the point of view of a mom who's a nurse, and her son has been shot in the Jack in the Box drive-through by police. He was in the back seat and he was reaching for his phone. And it's during the time when he's in the hospital and he's in a coma. And you guys are like, I thought you were going to tell a funny story. So Emmerich, I wrote Angel Wings because ESPN had this. There was an editor from the Bay Area here named Chris Ying. And do you remember Chris?
Yeah, he did the food magazine.
Exactly.
McSweeney's, yeah.
But before that, he was at McSweeney's, and he was asked by ESPN to round up a group of writers for their magazine. They wanted to publish their very first fiction issue. So it was like Dave Eggers and like Michael Shaven, and they asked me to write something for the fiction issue. And I wanted to write something fun. But that was when my middle kid was dating this guy named Dom. He was 6'7", and he had baller braids to here. He always wore a South Carolina cap. He was a really highly ranked recruit. And I've mentioned to you already, my ex-husband, who was 6'4" and was a basketball player. We met in junior high. I can't say how many times I feared for his life, when we were growing up. And the strangeness of who he was on the court, where everybody wanted him, right? And then who he was when we were off the court and everyone was scared of him. This was like central to my growing up. When I was like 14, 15, this is what we dealt with. And then to watch my daughter have the same exact experience all those years later with Dom. Dom was 6'7", and they got pulled over. She was speeding, because she's my kid. And she was in the little red Honda that we named Thelma. And it was Dom that they pulled out of the car, and it was Dom that they wanted. And so how could I look at her? And her dad yelled at her. He said, when you speed, you put him in like, imagine that. So now everyone talks about the talk, don't they? We were having the talk over and over and over again. So long ago, like when I was 13, 14, we had the talk. So I wrote this story, and I was shocked that ESPN gave me $3,000 and published it, but they did. And it was the saddest story I've ever written. Like in all of my life, it's the saddest thing I've ever written. I cannot read it without crying. And that never happens. Like I don't cry. The girls have seen me. One day we were in a parking lot and someone ran me over and parked on my ankle. Like she backed into me. I was wearing steel toe boots. That was good. And I'm lying there and I'm like, you need to get up off my ankle. And the girls are like, Mom didn't even cry when that lady parked on her ankle and then wouldn't move. So it's hard to make me cry. And I've only read this story twice, like, for edits. And I cried. It's not we're not going to sell any books. Anyway.
No, it's beautiful.
I'm saying it is I wrote it because it's every night when I went to bed and Delphine and Dom were out. And I wrote about chicken because I fed all those basketball players for all those years. Do you know how much chicken that is? They only wanted to eat chicken. It was like chicken tenders and chicken wings and Wingstop. And then we would go to Jack in the Box and everybody wanted chicken. And I kept thinking how many chickens died for the NBA. A lot of chickens died so that we can watch the NBA. because those guys are eating chicken in high school, and then they got travel ball and club ball. That's where it came from. So, yeah, I was shocked that ESPN published it, and it was a long time ago. And now when I think about it, like, that's a story that is more familiar to people. It doesn't mean it's any easier to tell it. So,
Or that it keeps happening.
yeah, I mean, it happens still all the time. So
Blaze, you had.
Well, I was trying to think why my question was gonna be so happy.
I'm very sorry.
I'm trying to go with another one on the fly. Well, I actually maybe just a historical question then. The sort of, it's not so much, I guess it's the remnants of a compound where Johnny Frias lives. There's some abandoned houses across the street in Andy and, and is that an actual place?
That's a great question. So, back in the day, all of Southern California, you had all these different citrus camps, right? And so the history of like citrus camps is you'd have orange groves, and that's in like Riverside, San Bernardino, Ontario, but Orange County too. And you had worker housing built. And it's really funny because in the old days, you had Japanese American workers, you had Italian and German POWs used to pick oranges like near Riverside. I remember that, hearing about that. So all those little like worker camps would have those little houses. I still drive by the remnants of one of those on my way to work every day. And my mother and father-in-law first lived there when they got married. They were like, oh, we got married in 1952 and General didn't have any money, so we had to live in Green Hollow. And then we had to move to Gray Hollow. And then we moved to Red Hollow. And they were like, those were the colors of the houses. And they were always like on the outskirts. And so there's remnants of Gray Hollow that I drive by all the time, and they're shotgun houses. So in the book, Johnny Frias, when he's talking about his mom and like the wind came down the canyon, I was imagining some of those worker camps that I remember from when I was a kid, and they would be, up a deep canyon, and there might be like 10 houses left, and they would have been old wooden houses. His just happens to be so far back that no one's gone in there and raised it. But the lady that owns the house,
Miss Dottie.
Miss Dottie is Dorothea Anza, like from Anza Crossing from 1774. And so again, if people are like, that's not possible, I went to school I still see the Trujillos, and they came in 1843, and their place is called La Placita, and we all went to high school together. So I see Darlene and Nancy and their sister Sharon, we all went to North High together, and they're like, oh yeah, we're trying to get my great grandfather Antonio Trujillo's like plow working again. And I'm just like, that's just amazing, that's so yeah, I wanted to sort of write about that, another hidden kingdom, right? The Trujillos, to me, Agua Mansa, La Placita, that's part of California history that everyone should know. Everyone should know that, because that man Antonio Trujillo was brought by the Spanish to keep an eye on their cattle, because the indigenous people were coming over the San Bernardino Mountains and stealing them. And so the only ones that could stop them was the Trujillos, because they were Apaches who'd been kidnapped by the Spaniards. So when Nancy Trujillo and I are sitting around, at our North High reunion at Duke's Bar and Grill, everyone's dancing, and we're like, and so then Lorenzo Trujillo sucked the like poison out of the wound of Benjamin Wilson, who became the first mayor of LA. Yeah, that's her uncle that did that. So like, what's happening?
That's amazing.
I know.
Any other questions? Oh, okay.
Because we're from the same area, known as Rio Seca. But anyhow, in our hometown, I was wondering, since you bring together all these, it's Riverside, California, you are essentially it's a wonderful melting pot now, and it's been a melting pot since before, but now it's, UCR has grown so much, and University has helped bring in more people from all over the world, and I was just wondering, if you've addressed out in the Arlington area, Casablanca apparently was Casablanca before Riverside was Riverside, and then there's the Sherman Indian School on Jackson and Magnolia. And I was wondering if either of those places have figured into your.
I mean, in past fiction, but Casablanca, it's funny. There's Casablanca is an old school Mexican American community. And then again, you have the north side, you have the east side, you have Hillside. There are all these neighborhoods. And so Casablanca as the name, I wouldn't put Casablanca because I try to make sure it's fiction.
Right.
And so Rubidoux has its own name, but there is a place like Casablanca in the fiction. Yeah, for sure.
And how about the Sherman Indian School?
I mean, I don't have all the places in there, but yes.
Yet.
But Leslie Marmon Silko has written a novel called Gardens of the Dunes, and she actually has Sherman Institute in there. It's true. But yeah, I do not have like that, those places named. I try to give places a fictional name whenever I can. Yeah, that was a good question.
So I always end my Q&A. Oh, go on. Yes.
I feel so lucky that I walked past Green Apple Books. Because I don't have a cell phone or anything, so I just happened to see that you were coming to talk about your book. It was a great privilege to be here with both of you. But I'm a San Franciscan, and my granddaughter has been at Riverside for 4 years to study, and in her 4th year, she let her grades drop.
Uh-oh.
So they sent her back home. Sent her back home. But she's here in the city now too. I can't wait to tell her about you,
What was she studying?
mostly sciences, biology.
Well, I'm shocked they kicked her out.
But you know, in her 4th year, I don't want to continue. I'm going to change my major. Her mother said, okay, just stay in school. And
Well, tell her to email me. It's easy to find me.
She changed to ethnic studies, but then she didn't do.
Well, tell her to email me. It's all our emails are the same, right? Susan.straight@ucr.edu. It's easy to get in touch. Okay. Well, it's been hard to do school on Zoom. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Zoom was really difficult. It was hard for students. That's part of why I was writing about Dante, the one kid whose parents have to leave him alone. I don't think there was anything harder than being a teenager or a young adult trying to do school on Zoom. And Zoom was hard for me because my neighborhood is so crazy that my internet would go out all the time. And that, you know, like lowriders would park in front of my house and play Art Laboe like super loud in the middle of the day. And then people were, why can't you make it quieter? My students were really happy when my internet messed up because it made them feel better, because there were professors that made them feel bad if their house was crowded or they had their camera off or there was a baby crying. I always thought that Zoom really pointed up all of the disparities, as everyone points out, of the world. And I can't tell you how often my students would be like, Professor Straight, you're making us feel better, because I'm like, you're just gonna have to wait until Mario stops the boom boom truck stuff, because it's literally 5 feet from my window. And after a while during the court, they'd be like, is your neighbor Mario home? And I would be like, yes, he is. Let's take our break now. And, you know, but then again, Mario's unloading a giant work truck that's full of air conditioning equipment. I think Zoom made a lot of people scared that they weren't ready to finish or to be a student. So tell her not to lose hope. Don't you guys think? Zoom was really hard. Yeah, it was very difficult. I'm glad that we're back in person at UCR because it means for me, I can take my students to Coffee Bean where I have my office hours now, not in my van. I treat all my students to coffee at Coffee Bean every week, whoever wants to come for office hours. And they be getting them like $7 caramel macchiato thing. See, I just bring my own tea bag. I'm just saying, that way I'm able to buy everyone coffee. So yeah, tell her not to lose hope, okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we stop.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, I have the speed round.
Guess.
Favorite freeway.
Guess? What?
I always end my in conversations
I
with a
did
speed
not know
round.
this. I'm not ready for a speed round.
You can say pass.
If you said Rummikub, I was gonna be traumatized. Like, please do not beat my ass. Rummikub.
There are no right or wrong answers. Favorite freeway.
Favorite freeway, the Pomona Freeway, the
Okay.
60, because it goes right by all my favorite places, like Mr. Taco, and then my house, and then the Santa Ana River bottom. 60.
Okay. Toblerone versus Reese's peanut butter cup.
Are you serious?
It's a trick question.
My mom is from Switzerland. We got 1 bar of Toblerone chocolate a year, and there was 5 kids. So we each got like 1 triangle, and then there was 1 left. It was a fight to the death. But my mom, when she comes over every day, we have to have Toblerone or Lindt and Sprungly, because those are the two things that she remembers so well. Every day, Vanessa, I open I make her a cup of tea. We watch the Dodgers. I open the Toblerone and she says, do you know Toblerone's been around since it's like 1843 or whatever. She never gets tired of it and she refuses to eat any other kind of chocolate, like nothing else. It's very funny.
Yeah, I was trying to buy you one for today, but I can't find it
No,
right
so
now.
that's the thing. It's been supply chain. There's been no Toblerone. I had to buy my mom a Hershey's bar. It's epic. It's epic.
Okay.
Anyway, we've been sticking with Lindt and Sprungly because that's also from
Swiss.
Switzerland and she can handle that, but we couldn't even find that. So there was a Cadbury moment. She at least was like, well, at least this one's from England.
And so final question, basketball or football?
Do you mean choose?
Yes,
Come on.
there is
girl.
no wrong answer.
I mean, it's basketball. Come on, it's the Lakers. I went to a Raider Nation party on Saturday where we all had to wear silver and black because it was old school, Lily Alala Raider Nation. It's the Lakers, it's the Dodgers, it's Formula One at my house, it's Liverpool for my son-in-law. We have to watch Liverpool. There's so many, I can't choose.
Okay.
I mean, it's all of that. Venus and Serena. Just don't, no lacrosse though. Lacrosse, that's a violent, primitive sport. I don't know how that's the sport of the upper classes. Like, I don't understand that people were like, well, football is a terrible sport. I'm like, but lacrosse? Like, people are trying to kill each other. I
Right,
don't
no
understand.
helmets.
No helmets. I'm not saying football is not dangerous, but all of it. The answer is all of it.
Okay.
I will watch all of those sports happily.
They are all your favorite daughters.
They are all my favorite sports.
Okay.
I love them all. I love me some football. And I mean, I know football's bad, but I have a broken collarbone right here from playing. We were supposed to, girls weren't supposed to play tackle. But at North, she went to Poly, which was a good school. At North High, we played tackle. So I broke my collarbone because Lila Romero tackled me one way and then somebody else tackled me another way. And then I had to ride my bike 5 miles home with a broken collarbone. And then my mom got really upset that my collarbone was broken, so she hit me.
Well, and your mom ran you over with her car
She
in
had
middle
earlier
school.
run me over with the car, so this bone was broken too.
You should all get Mecca and In the Country of Women. Thank you so much, Susan.
Oh, that was a lot of fun. I'm sorry it was scary.
I think we all had a really good time. I don't think it was that scary. Can we give it up one more
I
time for Susan?
sure hope my children don't be watching this on this video.
The comments say nothing short of this was wildly entertaining.
Okay.
So I'm very appreciative of you all for being here. I'm very appreciative of our authors. Thank you so much to Blaze and Alta and to all of you online. We do have copies